The hard part is stacking day on day on day on day and being consistent with it. Consistency, perseverance, and also, understanding that like this is not going to be perfect. Just get back on track as soon as you realize you're off track. I think all of that very closely ties to entrepreneurship.
Wes Barefoot, what's up, buddy?
Hey, Rick. Glad to be here, man. I always love talking to you, dude.
Likewise. Good to see you again. How's life?
Life's good, man. No complaints whatsoever. 2024 is off to a fast and furious start, and it's been a lot of fun so far.
Yeah, likewise, man. Likewise. Well, listen, we saw each other face to face not long ago, just in passing, because we were both just covered up. It was at a FranChoice conference, and those of you that don't know Wes, he is one of his many roles as a consultant at FranChoice, which is an agency, if you will, or company that sort of ties brands like mine to consultants like Wes, who then has candidates that are looking for investment opportunities or career change, whatever that may be, and he's trying to match them to the best opportunity that fits their lifestyle and financial thresholds and everything else. So we get together every 6 months, and for the last probably 2 years, I mean, we hit it off immediately because Wes is just a cool dude, and I liked talking to him. And every time I see Wes every 6 months, every time I see you, man, you're like incrementally changing, like physically. And I was like, what are you doing? You're like, well, you always kind of like downplay it and slow roll it. You're like, I'm working out a little bit, I was like, okay, well, then I saw you at this last conference. I'm like, all right, bro, look, let's get you on the podcast and talk about what you've been up to, because in the little bit that I gathered in those just passing conversations, sort of dead on with what Alloy would prescribe, in a lot of ways. So, before we dig in, I just want people to know that, like, you're a busy guy. So just kind of give us a landscape of your life overall before we get into like this mindset shift and all the things that you're doing to get to a healthier place. Well, what's a day in the life look like? What are all the roles and hats that you wear right now?
Yeah, man. It's, one of the things I love about kind of where I'm at in life right now is every day is a little bit different. And I can remember, years ago when I was, working as an employee for companies, and especially when I first got into franchising, I was working for franchisors, but, I was an employee. I had a 9-to-5 type job, but, I got exposed to entrepreneurs and founders and, people that had numerous things going on. And I just remember one day, coming home and telling my wife, I'm like, this is what I think we should be working towards. And I remember just kind of summing it up at one point, and this will give your audience some insight into how articulate I am. But I said, I just want us to get to a point where our only job is to wake up every day and manage our shit. So that's kind of where we're at. Do we have a long ways to go in terms of what we're capable of accomplishing? Have we figured it all out? By no means. But so, as you mentioned, I'm a franchise consultant with FranChoice. My kind of personal brand is Path to Freedom. Do a podcast that goes with that. You've been a guest on the podcast a few times. So that's where I really enjoy spending the vast majority of my working time is, working with individuals that are interested in exploring franchise ownership, doing the podcast, talking to other successful entrepreneurs, some involved in franchising, others not. In addition to that, my wife and I currently own one franchise business as franchisees. We've had that business for coming up on 6 years now, and that's been great for us. We were franchisees with a second brand up until about 3 or 4 months ago. We owned that business for a little over 3 years and just sold it. So that was nice to take a little bit off of my plate. There's a whole nother podcast episode in that story, Rick, in terms of what we did well, what we did not do well, lessons learned. But essentially, that was a manager-run business. My role was to oversee the manager and, kind of coach him. And after about 2.5 years, we parted ways with the manager, which resulted in me having to kind of step in and run the day-to-day, which kind of disrupted that. Wes gets to wake up and manage his shit every day.
Right.
I had to, kind of really prioritize that. And it went back to feeling a lot more like Wes has a day job and every day kind of looks the same. So anyways, and then on top of that, great family, 3 young kids, oldest daughter's getting ready to turn 7, son that's 3, another little girl that will be 2 in about a month. So that in itself keeps us very busy, is a lot of fun, but it's nonstop chaos. I wouldn't change it for the world, but a lot of juggling that comes with that, especially as the kids get a little bit older and our activities, sports, that sort of thing. And beautiful wife as well. So that's kind of the setup, I guess, that we've got going right now.
Yeah. So, and for those of you guys listening, FranChoice is in some ways a franchise in and of itself, right? So you're self-employed with that structure. So it's like you've got two businesses, you're married, you've got three young kids, which keeps you busy. And by the way, that will continue through their teenage years, probably even more so. So
I have no doubt.
The whole premise of your podcast, Path of Freedom, that's really what it's about, right?
Yeah.
But if I take all of that and you look at, okay, here's a guy who's got right now 2 entrepreneurial businesses, 3 very young kids. He's married. He's got a lot of responsibilities on his plate. It's even more impressive that every time I see you, you seem to be fitter than the last time I saw you. And so I really wanted to talk to you today about how you manage that. And I think it'll be good for people to hear not only the things that we've talked about align with what we would prescribe, which is kind of the front edge of what science is telling us right now, but also for people to hear that might be listening that aren't fitness people per se. A lot of the investors that invest in Alloy, they're not like fitness people. They just recognize the value in it, right?
Yeah.
But I think for someone like you, how do you manage that, right? And so let's start out with just the mindset. So, look, you weren't in terrible shape before. I'm trying to make it sound like you were 400 pounds and on death's door. It wasn't that at all.
No.
But when I saw you a few years ago, you were sort of just starting your journey. And then it's been 2 years. I see you every 6 months. Every 6 months, incrementally, you're more fit, more energy, and you look different. You look healthier, right? And so, what was early on that mindset shift for you? What got you started with all that chaos? Because at that time, you had 3 entrepreneurial businesses, kids, wife. Sounds like pregnant back then. So, like, how did you and why did you flip the switch to try to get to a healthier place? Was there anything you can talk about?
Yeah, I think it was a combination of things. I mean, kids was definitely part of it, right? I wanted to, be the type of dad that had the energy to get down on the ground and play with the kids and take them to the park, even after a long day working or whatever. Like, you look around, you see other parents that are in terrible shape, and I want to be a good role model to my kids, right? So I didn't want to kind of continue down the path I was going, which was I just wasn't really paying a whole lot of attention, and to your point, I was never like drastically overweight, but I'd gotten pretty soft, and it wasn't my number one priority for a long time. Then I got to a point where I was focusing on it, but I was half-assing it, for lack of a better term. I was trying to do it on my own. From a nutritional standpoint, I didn't really understand the science behind it. It's overwhelming, especially these days with social media. If you go try to figure out a good nutrition plan, I mean, my wife and I were literally just joking this morning. She's like, if you watch all these, gurus or whatever on Instagram, if you watch enough of them, there's nothing left to eat, right? You got the guy telling you to be vegetarian. You got the guy telling you to be carnivore. You got the guy, telling you to be gluten-free or whatever. It's like,
yeah, man,
there's a lot of conflicting
I tell you, it's so
information.
confusing.
Yeah.
Well, I've got one for you that you may have heard of, and any of our listeners that haven't heard of this guy. There's a guy named Alan Aragon. So it's Aragon, right? And he does since 2008. Crazy to think. He's been publishing a paper called the Alan Aragon Research Review. Now, I don't know what would motivate somebody to want to do this, but imagine someone who's going to curate, study, look at all studies about a subject, like is vegan better than non-vegan? Not philosophically or altruistically or love animals, not that, but like literally from a nutrition standpoint, is this better or not? Because it can be a bit like a religion. You got vegans that are so hardcore that they're throwing blood on you if you're wearing a leather jacket, and then you've got on the other end of the spectrum people that only eat dead animals, and if you eat a plant, it's going to kill you. And as you can imagine, now also, I should say that like Alan Aragon, he's not beholden to anyone. There's no sponsors, there's no nothing. It's like
that's important.
$10-15 a month. It's really important, right? Because the studies are often sponsored by the very, entity that wants you to be influenced by those studies. And so, imagine knowing the difference between good research and bad research, who sponsored the research, who didn't, curating all that and saying, okay, based on all the research, here's what we're seeing. He's a great guy to help anyone listening to this to get out of the mud when it comes to all the confusion. Cool. And as you can imagine, it's not the answer that people like. It's typically somewhere in the middle. Like if you're eating the average American diet, as an example, and you go to a vegan diet, are you going to be healthier? Of course. I mean, everything's healthier than that, right? If you go to carnivore, are you going to be healthier? Of course, right? If you intermittent fast, is there any magic to that? Probably not. Probably just a reduction in calories, right? So really, and people listening to this probably already like, oh, no, that's not true. And they might be using their own, anecdotal studies on themselves. My guy, he's jacked. I'm like, he's probably jacked before he skip breakfast that day. I don't know. Liver King, yeah, that guy, he's natural, natty, as we might say, and us folks in the industry might say, of course,
steroids whatsoever.
You don't have to eat bull testicles and everything like that to be healthy. I think we can. That's been established, but you can. Like, listen, it's not going to hurt you. Maybe just make sure that the temperature of the cooking there could be something
I wouldn't go in raw. That's for sure.
I wouldn't.
So those types
that reminds me of a whole other story.
Those types of resources are good. Someone
so for you and your wife, check it out. It's like he puts out a monthly newsletter, and it's like, does the timing of your protein intake affect how much lean tissue you can gain? Yes or no? And then it's usually like, well, maybe, but it has to be these. You know what I mean? And normally you're like, I'm fine. I mean, I think what we're going to get to today, just from the little bit that you guys that we've talked about, Wes, in these interactions, is like, it's not that complicated.
It's not.
It's not easy. That's the hard part. Is it's not easy, and I think that's the part. It's kind of like small business or franchising. It's not complicated. It's just not easy. And then when it's not easy, we want to look for things that might complicate it because we don't want to just do the thing that's right there.
Yeah, looking for a shortcut, right? And
always
there's not,
and that's human nature. Like, you shouldn't even feel bad if you do it, because we all do it, by the way, right? So the mindset for you was, look, I want to be young and healthy. I want to show up as the best person in my life. I think there's not a person listening to this doesn't understand that, like, if you're healthy, fit, your brain works better, you're a better father, entrepreneur, you're a better counselor, if you will, consultant, to lead people through this journey to them becoming entrepreneurs. Like, the whole deal, man, it all gets better.
There was a couple other pieces to it as well from a mindset standpoint. I mean, part of it was just kind of looking in the mirror and saying, look, I've had some success in some of these other aspects of my life that are important, but when it comes to my fitness and even just the way I look, like, I'm average at best, and that rubbed me wrong for years, right? And so, even before I really got serious and started consistently making some noticeable progress, it wasn't necessarily for lack of trying, right? I mean, I worked out for a couple of years before I actually started working with a trainer. I would try different things from a nutritional standpoint, right? Like, I did the 75 hard challenge and, lost like 15 pounds or so, but then it all came right back. So I wanted to, number one, just kind of test myself a little bit and say, look, man, you've kind of been able to figure out a lot of other things to get to a point where you're above average. Like, why can't you do it with this? And I wanted to find a way to do it that was sustainable, but also not so disruptive to my life, right? Where I couldn't, have a slice or two of pizza on Friday night with the kids, or, eat some popcorn when we're watching a movie or whatever. I didn't want to have to, like, isolate myself so much with this, like, rigid lifestyle that I couldn't enjoy life, and that, my kids were like, our dad's a nutcase, like, he's over here eating, bull testicles or whatever. So so that was part of it too. And I wanted to just be someone that not only my kids would look up to, but think about it from a consulting standpoint, right? Like, are people more likely to take you seriously if it's clear to them that you take yourself seriously and you prioritize your own health, right? And I remember hearing something at one point, and it was actually from the guy that started the fitness company that I work with, which we can get into more detail on if you'd like. You and this guy should meet. But and he kind of speaks specifically to entrepreneurs and CEOs, people that are driven, ambitious, they're busy, but they have opportunity to get better when it comes to their health and fitness. And, he talks a lot about, how people flex, right? Whether that be with their house or their car or their Rolex or, the fancy vacation, but then they look like crap when they take their shirt off by the pool. He's like, look, lots of us, especially if you live in America, can get the resources to flex in that kind of a way. But the ultimate flex is your body, right? Because you can't buy that, right?
Right.
You can't buy a six pack. You can't buy looking better than 90% of the other people in the room. That resonated with me. That got me thinking about things in a little bit of a different way. And so it really was more of a challenge to myself than anything. And I think the ultimate mindset switch was partially acknowledging to myself that, yes, I want to get in better shape for my kids, for the people around me, all of that, but I want to get in better shape for me. And kind of just getting comfortable saying, you know what? I want to get a six pack because it looks good and it gives me more confidence and I feel better walking around. I think a lot of people are not really willing to acknowledge that themselves.
That's a
or
great
outwardly,
point. Yep.
I had to make that mindset shift. Like, you know what? There's nothing wrong with wanting to get in shape just so you freaking look good.
That's a great point. Because I think a lot of people, through the lens of society, it's like something's vain about that or what have you. And that's fine. Like if you don't want it, great. But there's a difference between needs and wants, right? And I think if you look at like everyone needs to be fit to live their best life possible. Not everybody needs six pack, but if you want one, that's fine. Like just own it. Just be like, you know what? I want to be that guy. I want to be in the top 5% physically. And like somebody else might not want that. And that's fine too. If they're healthy, they might live just as long as you. They just may not want a six pack. And that means their habits don't have to be as strict. Have at it. But like, let's not throw shade and say it's shallow. If you do want it, you want what you want, and you should be perfectly comfortable. It's sort of like, I'm sure you walk people through this warrior loop when they're getting into entrepreneurship and they're working for a big company. And it's like, it's sort of that tall poppy syndrome that they have maybe in UK and like, which bleeds over to Australia, where it's like, who are you to think that you can leave your corporate structure and just strike out on your own and do your own thing? It's like, well, who's to say that you can't, or why do you care? Like, if that's what you want, that's what you want, and just go do it. Right. You don't need to do it. You can keep your day job in middle-level management and get downsized at 55 years old and maybe, go work at Walmart as a meter grid. Do what you want. Like, I mean, that may be, sure, you can do that. But if you want something different, you shouldn't feel wrong in wanting that, even if it's a six pack, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And, usually the people throwing shade are the ones that, are not doing any of those things. And so,
right,
by seeing you make moves, whether that be going out and starting your own business or getting serious about it, strikes a nerve.
Somehow a negative reflection on them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Or it's that sort of scarcity mindset where even in business, like, and you've heard this, like if one person's doing well, it's at the expense of something else, which is not true. The pie is like an infinite size. Just because someone's taking a bigger slice doesn't reduce my slice. Like, go get my slice, right? The pie can grow.
With fitness, right? Like, just because I'm getting in better shape, it doesn't mean you've gotten in worse shape. Like, I'm still like chasing guys like you. Like, I have a long way to go. And for the record, I don't technically have a six pack yet. Definitely closer than I was when
How did you get on this podcast?
Not quite there. Yeah, I don't have to take my shirt off today.
Let's get that was we were going to end up that way. So I don't really know where this podcast is going to go now. Maybe we shift to something else.
I mean, with a little bit of Photoshop, it could probably look like at least a 4-pack. But
there's an app that just does that. I saw the other day a buddy of mine posted a picture of him on the beach, and he's pretty fit already, but isn't
Liver King on it?
But he's like, he does not, but he should. But it said abs are made in the kitchen, and it said ... or on an app, and he just had these perfectly etched abs. But it's like an app. You just take your picture.
I think I did see
swap
something
it on there, and it gives you a six pack. So look, so you don't even have to do it anymore. I heard that like over 80% of images within 3 years on Instagram or any other platform will not be. They'll be completely AI generated. So it's not even going to be real people anyway. So like, who cares? Right? We can give you six pack if you want. Well, hey, for the sake of time, let's skip to like tactically. just give me your weekly exercise routine. Like, what are you currently doing?
Yeah.
Just how many days of this, how many days of that?
So the big kind of change, right? And I guess like the tactics behind, all right, what started to actually get some consistent, sustainable results versus, I would have these kind of spurts of some success, and then I would go, and it was all simply because I didn't know what I was doing. In some cases, I thought I knew what I was doing because, I watched people on Instagram or whatever. But from everything from the types of workouts I was doing, the regularity of the workouts I was doing, and then the big missing piece was definitely nutrition. So, abs are made in the kitchen, 100% bought into that. So I hired a trainer, and the
And this is an
program I've
online
been
coach, right?
this is an
And only
online
and
coach.
the caveat is only because Wes doesn't have an alloy in his market. But I don't know if you guys heard earlier, he did sell one of his other businesses, so he's now open for business to open an alloy. So we'll have that
It's
discussion
true.
later.
We've kicked the
Why
idea
not? Well,
around,
you're not a
and
busy guy. You don't have anything going. Let's get an alloy in your market. Be a good market, by the way.
it would.
But you did
It
hire an
would.
online coach. So what did
Yeah.
he give you for a weekly schedule for exercise? Give us the high
All right.
level.
So strength training 3 days a week. All right. He
Boom.
writes the workout for me. Got a nice little app where, I go in, it's got the workout laid out. I track my
Yeah,
workout.
we've got that as well, by the way.
I've seen it, and it's very similar. Yeah.
Yeah, it may be the same. It may be the same app, by
Could
the
be the
way.
same platform or something, but
Yep.
instructional videos and things like that. So, you make
Yep.
sure you're doing it correctly, right form, all that. And so compare that to what I was doing before. So most of it's full body, right? I'm not doing
Yep.
leg
Love
day.
it.
I'm not doing
Same,
chest
same.
day. You're
Yep.
kind of hitting all these different sections 3 different times a week.
Yep.
But there's strategy behind the workouts that he's building for me, right? And it's progressive strength training. And I'll do the same 3 workouts a week for usually 4 to 6 weeks. And then, he'll change it up a little bit. The app's nice because you track progress, right? So the workout I'll do this afternoon, I'll see what I did last Friday when I did
as far
that
as
workout.
load and yeah, volume and reps, all the things. Yeah.
Yep.
So 3 days weights. What else are you doing?
This one I thought was silly when he first told me about it, but he was like, "Look, man," because I'm like, "Look, I've got a Peloton, I'm thinking cardio for fat loss, right?" Because the
Right.
first,
Everybody does.
yeah, and he's like, look, if you enjoy getting on the Peloton, I'm like, well, some of the instructors are kind of hot, but I don't enjoy it that much. He's like,
right.
you don't need to get on that bike unless you just want to, or if you want to do it once a week for cardiovascular training, great, in terms of just like actually strengthening your cardiovascular system. But 10,000 steps a day, 7 days a week. I don't even go crazy when it comes to tracking my steps. Obviously there's tons of wearables out there that you can track your steps. I try to get at least a 60-minute walk in a day.
Love it.
And that could be, I've got an under desk treadmill. So like this morning, I did my 60 minutes on an under desk treadmill while I caught up on emails. Obviously my preference is go outside if the weather's good, get some fresh air, get some sunshine. That's been great, not only because it does make a difference, if you're trying to lose weight, if you're doing it consistently day in, day out, it does actually move the needle. I would have never thought that just, walking would make that much of a difference. But man, talk about just a way to energize yourself, bring your energy up. If you're, whether it's calls all day or emails or just inside all day, go walk outside, get some sunshine, get some fresh air. It's amazing, what that will do to your mindset and your perspective. So that's been great. And I'm usually either listening to a book or a podcast while I do it, or a lot of times the way I get my walk in is that's how me and the kids hang out, at the end of the day when I'm done walking. I'll go take them for a walk, or like my son's learning to ride his bike right now. I'll throw all 3 of them and a couple kettlebells in the wagon and push that for 60 minutes, different ways you can do it. It doesn't get old. It doesn't get boring because you can mix it up. So anyways, that's kind of the strength training. And me personally, I'm doing my workouts at home. I kind of prefer it that way because it gives me more flexibility. Today I'll work out probably shortly after we finish this. Some days I do it in the morning. Some days I do it at like 5 p.m. It just depends.
But come hell or high water, you're getting 3 days a week of weights and you're getting in your 10,000 steps a day, which, by the way, like we've talked about this. And one reason I wanted to have you on is because in those few passing conversations, it seems like what you're doing aligns perfectly with what we'd recommend through Alloy. It's like, get to the gym 3 days a week, do your weights, right?
Yep.
We have an app as well. It pulls in wearables. We're going to give you a step goal. Just get moving more outside the gym. If you look at the blue zones all over the world where people live to be 100 years old, they're not doing HIIT training, right? They're just moving around a lot. They're getting sunshine. They get outside. They have some friends, all the things that make a healthy mind and help you live, and healthy body, help you live a long time. So like, let's get you moving. So, and that's something I think we disregard a lot in the US is we're in a car centric society. We don't move around as much. So get you 10,000 steps a day by any means necessary. The only thing I would add to that, Wes, would be, and it's not absolutely crucial, but VO2 max is also a predictor of longevity. And so just 1 day a week, try to get some high end cardio. So if you had like zone 1 to zone 5 is like, you can't do it more than 3 minutes or it's going to kill you. Zone 1 is like, you're barely moving. So for you, that those walks are probably in that zone 2 range, right? Which where you spend the bulk of your time. To maybe 20 to 30 minutes a week, just throw in like if you have like an assault bike or hill sprints or just something, right? Where it's just like, interval and then rest periods as long as the interval or maybe a bit longer, and then do that just to keep it simple. But that really high heart rate can be beneficial. But the thing is, if you stay in zone 3-4, which is where most people go when it's a cardio class, like say it's a class-based concept franchise where you're running on treadmill or you're jumping around the room or whatever, like you're not going hard enough to get the VO2 max benefits of zone 5 because you have to survive for 45 minutes, but you're also not working at a low enough pace to get the heart health benefits of like the zone 2. So like Peter Attia, who's one of the foremost anti-aging doctors, he calls that zone 3-4 the garbage zone, which is sort of like you're not going low enough to get the heart health benefits. You're not going hard enough, right, to get the VO2 max. So it's like you're kind of in no man's land, and it's better than nothing. Don't get me wrong. I'm not one of those guys who's like, you don't do it this way. But I think if you said, well, I'm going to exercise, what should I do? That's the prescription, right? So you're on it, man. Perfect. Well, let's talk about nutrition next.
What's your preferred way for you personally to get that zone 5? Is it the assault bike?
It is, because it's awful. It gets your heart rate up really quick. It doesn't beat you up, right? So I'm sometimes like in the summer, I'll go out to like an athletic field and just run sprints. But the likelihood of like pulling something is much higher running a sprint than on the assault bike. So I can get on the assault bike, 3 minutes on, 3 minutes off. That's 6 minutes. I do 5 rounds. It's 30 minutes done. And I hate it. It's the worst thing ever. I'd rather get a root canal. But to be honest, if my VO2 max is a predictor of me living longer and I want to go out to Colorado and hike a 14,000 foot mountain or something, I know I'm going to be out of breath. It's really helpful in that regard. Yeah. But the bulk of my time is spending exactly 3, like workout with weights, full body every other day. Right. Again, like walk. So try to get 4 or 5 miles of walking. I go out in the mornings with a couple buddies that we all have dogs and just kind of go walk through the woods, have a good old time.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's not even like I'm exercising. About a good I would do it. I would do it if it wasn't good for me. I just enjoy it.
Yeah, I mean, talk about a good way to start the day. Just go out, and I think you told me you guys have some trails that you go, like, just getting out in nature a little bit. Like
the sun's coming up, you're getting some sun in your face. You're having some camaraderie with some other guys. You're just talking crap. Like you're also socializing. There's all the things that are that, again, if you looked at like a blue zone, that are all contained there, right?
You're also
for the sake of time,
your terms,
we got to keep you moving. Well, yeah, 100%. Let's get to nutrition. Let's try, like, this can be wild. So let's keep it simple. You gave me 2 points before we started the podcast. I'd love to just stick to those 2 because it can get crazy. So you're like, here's the 2 main things I focus on. And I agree with those wholeheartedly. I do the same. It's what we prescribe to our clientele. So give us the 2 main levers that you pull in nutrition that you feel have made the biggest difference.
So I'm going to add one, but I'll keep it short. The first was actually starting to track what I was eating.
Okay.
Okay, so
Tracking.
that's
And our
something
app
I
does that as
never.
well. It pulls in MyFitnessPal, which you said they have the most robust library.
Yep.
Love it. So tracking first.
Yep. Something I'd never done before. Now it's like second nature, and it's not a big deal at all. It was a little clunky for the first week or two, but so tracking first, and then it's calories and protein, right? So my trainer, based on where I'm at in terms of progress, but also where I'm at, are we in, a fat loss phase? Are we, coming up out of a fat loss phase? He'll give me a calorie goal for every day, and the goal is to stay at or under that calorie target. And then there's a protein goal every day, and the protein is you want to at least hit it and potentially exceed it. That's it, right? I mean, we look at a little more than that. Like you said, you can get really in the weeds with this type of stuff, but those are the two key levers. And in doing that, I've not had to make any drastic changes in terms of like cutting out food that I enjoy. Number one, just paying attention to it makes a big difference, right? Because you'll rethink like, oh shit, maybe I should not reach my hand into that bag of chips because like it's just a lot of empty calories. The protein was the big thing for me, and that was like
Right.
one of the missing. I didn't understand the importance of protein and making sure you're consistently getting enough of it in your diet. And if you do that, especially if you're getting the bulk of your protein from whole foods, um, you're just not that hungry, so
That's
the
it. I mean,
cravings.
in the simplest way, that protein goal just increases your satiety. You just don't have room
Yeah.
to eat other stuff. And
Yeah.
I know it sounds like an oversimplification, but quite honestly, that's probably the best benefit. Sure, it's a building block. It doesn't magically do a lot of things. I had Alan Argon, the guy I mentioned earlier, on the podcast, and he did say that there is some research, which is fascinating, that just synthesizing protein alone will add some lean tissue to your body, even without strength training, which I had never actually
Oh,
heard that before. Now
yeah.
it's not significant, but it's just interesting that just
Some.
eating adequate protein alone would add some lean tissue to your body. And then if you were doing some strength training, what I'm not talking about, if you're listening to this and you're sort of new to fitness, the knee jerk is always like, well, I don't want to get big muscles. It's like, that's not going to happen quickly. I mean, you'll see it coming, believe me. And so we're just talking about lean tissue in the sense that like your body will function better and your metabolism will be better and you'll be able to, you'll be in less pain if you can move better. I mean, all the things that come along with like being strong individual, not necessarily being like, puffed up with big muscles. That's not what we're talking about. I love it. I mean, you're 100% right. Increase protein. That will by default help you reduce your calories because your satiety will be higher. Protein's relatively low, per gram in calories. Whereas fats and sugars and things like that are typically going to be a bit higher. So it makes it much easier, right?
What are your go-tos for protein if it's not coming from whole foods like, chicken, red meat,
Powders.
like that, powders?
Powders. Yeah. And it was funny because when I had Alan on the podcast, I said, what do you think about protein powders? He's like, it's the most ridiculous effective, shortcut hack I've ever seen. I don't know why more people don't do it. I mean, it's perfectly healthy. It processes similar to regular food. It's really good for you. So, if you can't tolerate dairy and you don't want to do a whey protein, I said, what about vegan proteins? You can do pea protein. There's a lot of proteins that will work, right?
See,
In
I
that
was
regard.
curious
So
about the vegan proteins and their effectiveness because I mix some of
work
that
just fine.
into, yeah,
Yep.
like I
Work just fine.
okay, that's good to know. And I do a shake in the mornings. I don't tend to have much of an appetite first thing in the morning, so a shake
Right.
and Greek yogurt's been huge
Yeah.
for me.
Yep.
That's kind of, whatever protein I need at the end of the day to round out and make sure I hit and throw a little bit of granola in there, some fresh fruit
Sure.
and a drizzle of like fresh honey. That's a dessert, man. That's freaking
Yeah.
delicious.
Yeah.
you know?
I know people overcomplicate it, but if you just lean in for a minute and you track and you see where you are and you set some simple goals around, okay, here's my target calories. And then here's, if I just get my protein where I need to, it will take care of a lot, maybe 80% of the things. Right. And then of course, everybody's different. And, what works now might need to be adjusted in the future, but that's why you go
Yeah.
to an alloy or you hire an online coach or whatever. Right.
Yeah.
Perfect, man. I mean, I love it because you've been very effective with it. It's been slow and steady. It's become part of your
Yeah.
lifestyle, even though your life has only gotten more chaotic and busier over the last few years since we met. But you mentioned something pre-podcast that I thought we could wrap up with, which there are some parallels from your lens to fitness, being fit, and then being successful as an entrepreneur. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, yeah, and in particularly, I think there's a lot of parallels to entrepreneurship in general, in particularly with franchising, though, right? Because and this is a point, I wanted to make sure came out today. What I've been doing, so we're recording this late January 24. I started this. I was one of those guys that paid a deposit in November, but was like, I got to get through the holidays. We'll start January 1st, right? So January 1st, 2023. So I'm like a little over a year into working with this trainer through this program. And that's where the vast majority of the results have happened, is in the last basically 13 months. Every single day, what I have to do to stay on track is far easier than what I was doing before on my own. The workouts are easier in terms of the level of intensity, the toll that they're taking on my body, right? A little bit of an adjustment to start tracking the food and kind of figure out, all right, what do I enjoy eating and can eat to make sure I'm hitting these goals. But once you kind of have that, that was a couple weeks of figuring that out. So it's not like it's been this excruciating process to actually start seeing some results. The hard part is stacking day on day on day on day and being consistent with it. Okay. So that, I believe, 100% applies to entrepreneurship in any form or fashion, right? Consistency, perseverance, and also, understanding that, like, I'm not going to be perfect every day, right? I mess this up some days, right? I have not hit 100% of the workouts that I was supposed to do over the last 13 months, right? I've not, hit my nutrition targets on the nose every single day. I've messed it up. So, a little bit of grace for yourself to say, look, this is not going to be perfect. Just get back on track as soon as you realize you're off track. I think all of that very closely ties to entrepreneurship. The parallel I would draw to franchising is, for whatever reason, I don't know why it took me this long, but I finally said, you know what, look, this is not what I'm an expert in. So let me go find someone that's done this themselves, helped a lot of other people do it, and just plug in with them and work smart instead of hard. And then this is going to blow your mind, Rick, but follow the process, follow the program. Don't
What?
now
What?
crazy, right? Revolutionary, I know, but don't make that and this similar to an alloy, right? Because you guys are not the cheapest fitness option out there. This program that I joined was a um, sizable investment, right? And that's part of why I liked it. So that's another, I wasn't even planning to go here, but quick other parallel. I think that's part of the advantage of a franchise, right? You put some serious skin in the game up front. That makes it a lot harder to
You're going to
bow
pay
out
attention to that.
when things get tough, right? So that
Yep.
was kind of similar in this situation, and I wrote a pretty big check and was like, all right, dude, you can't mess around with this. You got to follow through, following the program, not thinking you know better. I mean, the walking, for example, right? When he's first kind of laying out the program, I'm like, oh, what? I'm just going to walk every day, and that's going to, like, really help. Well, thankfully, I trusted what he said, dropped a little bit of my ego and said, you know what? All right, I'm paying this guy a lot of money because he's the expert here. I'm going to do what he tells me to do. That's key, when it comes to franchising. And, just like with a franchise, I did some research. I didn't, pull the trigger on the first online fitness company that came across my Instagram account, right? Like, there's a lot of
Right.
trash out there, when it comes to online trainers and programs, just like there's a lot of franchises that are probably not, as high quality as some of the other ones out there. So do your research, right? Make sure it's the right program for you, just like you want to make sure, if you're getting into a franchise, it's the right type of business for you with the right partners. But once you're committed, just almost follow blindly, at least until you know enough to have an educated opinion on, okay, does it make sense to maybe change this up a little bit or look at things a little bit differently? So anyways, that's been kind of an interesting correlation that I've noticed as I've kind of been going through this program for the last year or so.
Yeah, I love it. Follow the process. So hiring a coach would be very similar to buying a franchise. It's a proven system. It's been done over and over again. Certainly there's some nuance to different individuals and different markets and things like that. Most of that's accounted for, but for the most part, the basic blueprint's going to get you most of the way there.
Yeah,
but you just got to run the play. You got to have trust in it. Like you trusted your coach to do 10,000 steps a day, which seemed meaningless. Now on the other end of it, you're like, wow, look at the results. I see you 13 months later. It's like you're a different person. So, well, look, brother, I really appreciate it. If people want to get a hold of you, how would they do so?
Yeah. Website is pathtofreedom.com. We can put a link in the show notes because the spelling's a little,
I'll do it.
It's a little short form version of that. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I'm on the other social platforms. Thankfully, I have a great team of people that kind of manage that stuff for me because it would never get done if it were left up to me. Biggest thing I'd ask if you want to learn more about what I've got going on is check out the podcast. I get the chance to sit down with people that are much smarter and interesting than I am all the time. And I get to learn from them. The goal is that anyone who checks out the podcast gets to learn from them. Rick's been a guest on the show a couple of times, along with a lot of other really successful entrepreneurs that just have cool stories to share. So that's path number 2 freedom on any of the podcast platforms out there.
All right, brother. Well, listen, ladies and gentlemen, Wes Barefoot, appreciate you coming on again, my friend. Keep up the good work.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it. Thanks for everything that you do.
Cheers.